So my presentation, is about a new open source tool called Clairmeta, and I'm also piling onto this a new release from SMPTE, which is called SMPTE RDD52, and we'll get back into the presentation, what all that means and how that can help you as a cinema and basically help the industry, because one of the things we're really talking about a lot at the moment is the table of contents, but you can look at that later. But in this, with the crisis and all this stuff going on, one of the things that's becoming very apparent now that the industry has become more digital, digital projectors, digital automation, etc., is that we're now at a stage where a lot of these technologies are maturing, and there's an improvement in productivity that can occur if we embrace the capabilities of a lot of these technologies, as for example the GDC demonstrated Adam at the first presentation, how they're working very hard to do that. In this presentation, I'm going to be talking about something that's basically open source. And so just looking at the sort of problems this will solve first, I'll just go through the sort of things that we're looking to solve with what I'm going to show you today. Now, Clairmeta is a QC tool, or a tool for testing content, to make sure that it's well formed or well created, so that if you do put it into your projector, it will play. So this is important to cinema owners. For example, on point one, is that if content is coming to a cinema owner, and more content is coming from a lot more different locations these days, because we're becoming more dynamic and more, with alternative content, etc., or doing our own advertising or stuff like that, being able to easily ensure the content coming in is agreeable with your digital projection systems is beneficial. And if it's easy to do with a simple tool, it's beneficial to you as an exhibitor, so you're reducing potential issues and producing potential having to check for technical issues. That's a cost and it's an effort. Also, if you're doing a film festival, or you're a content agent like an advertising company that sells cinema ads, again, these sort of tools can greatly resolve or prevent issues occurring and ensure that there's a smooth running of the business in terms of allowing you to send out content and making sure it works in all the locations. Other things that these tools will give us, and I'll show you in point 3 here later on in the presentation, I'll go over a tool that I've been working on. It's a web tool with actually which has integrated Clairmeta into it, and that's why I'm talking about it today, because I've been implementing Clairmeta quite a bit and been using it into an online tool, which we'll talk about later. But it allows a cinema owner or another vendor that is serving the cinema industry to better build automation work models and QC into their workflows. And finally, point 4, open source is very important, and we should embrace it as an industry, and I'll get into those reasons later on in the presentation. Okay, so just looking at the statements of what Clairmeta is. So it's a Python package for digital cinema package probing and checking. So that's what it's for. What does that mean? Well, Python is a programming language. It's one of the most prolific and used programming languages in the world. It's very easy to get people who understand it, and it's well documented, and it's easy to get information on the internet, YouTube, etc., how to use Python. And Clairmeta is using that, and that's a good advance here. I'd just like to mention that there are some other open source tools which are a bit older, like people may have heard of CineTechGeek. That was based on another type of language, and it was more difficult to get going and harder to implement into systems, and not really something that a cinema owner would likely be able to get their hands on without having a lot of technical ability put behind it, and that costs money too. Now, there's a link at the bottom for where to have a look at the source code, and thank you for Image and Remy, who was the principal developer at Image at the time. He's now moved on to a production company in London, I think, but he's still working on it hard, and I've been working on it with him as well, making some significant changes to make it more appropriate for the sort of things I'm talking for today, because it was originally designed for emergent use, but I'm trying to get that, we're expanding it to take on these new developments and achieve the sort of things which I'm going to show you today. Now, the other big recent development is SMPTE RDD52. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's the statement of what it means there, but the stuff underlined is really what we're looking at, highest percentage of systems to play. So SMPTE and the SMPTE DCP standards are very good, and they're much better than the old interop. They far better describe exactly what the files need to be and how they need to be formed and created. So going to SMPTE DCP, which we're mostly done now these days, should again jump us to more reliability, because the standard's more ratified, it's more tested, it's more understood. But at the same time, there's a lot of players out there that have quirks and little gotchas, etc., which even though you can make a DCP that is compatible with the SMPTE standard, it doesn't mean it's going to play on all the players out there. And SMPTE RDD is basically building on top of those and saying, okay, this is how you may make a DCP, but these are the things you need to do to ensure that it plays on the highest percentage of systems out there. So that's a really good development, considering what we're trying to do here. So getting your QC to, when you put something to Deluxe or some other content distribution agency and they knock it back saying there's an issue here, issue here, issue here. Well, this tool will now help you achieve that faster and give you more information on how to rectify the information. And also companies that do, or even open source companies like DCP-O-Matic, for example, will most likely adopt the information in the standard, and it will obviously result in a much more reliable creation of DCPs from it, which obviously is used by a lot of cinema owners to make their own pre-show content, etc. So those are some really good developments in recent times. So this is just an overview. So we talked about before. So the SMPTE DCP plus an open source QC tool, and adding on top the knowledge and understanding that, and the, you know, because SMPTE RDD is basically the knowledge of the industry over the last so many years of us making DCPs, put into a document to make it reliable, and putting all that together, and we're going to get more reliable and cost-effective industry when it comes to the engine of playing content and making content and getting it onto the screen. So Clairmeta plus RDD52 is under development. So RDD52 is new. Clairmeta does a lot of things that RDD52 requires, but that's just a matter of course. It still has to be more integrated because it's quite new. And Clairmeta we're going to look through some of the requirements and also add quite a few issues that it points out in that document and make them as part of the report of Clairmeta. There's also, excuse me, quite a bit of work done. I'm working with the developer to actually develop more sort of reports which are more useful to the sort of use model that we would need in the cinema industry in doing this sort of work. But on top of that, and this is important, so some of the bigger issues that RDD52 really points out is some of the big pitfalls that most general software fails when it comes to making content which is readily playable on a lot of systems. Is there's some very quirky subtitle requirements in terms of the way that the metadata is created, etc. There's also some other J2K and how we create those bit streams, and some other issues there that that RDD52 really points out, and those issues will be added to Clairmeta in coming months or so. Now, the other thing which is really good and why I'm quite excited about Clairmeta is because it is totally Python based, and unlike CineInspect could do, because it was based on the sort of implementation that it had, it will be possible, and I'll work towards this, to turn Clairmeta into a desktop app using some sort of, there are tools to turn Python applications into desktop applications. And we will look at potentially doing that in the future. So later down the track, you may be able to download Clairmeta and run it on your PC and select the directory and hit go, and it'll be a typical easy turnkey. Any operator could pretty much do that to test their data. But at this stage, it's more being utilised for companies who are building work chains or workflows to make more enterprisey solutions with this sort of stuff. But I'll show you one of those towards the end, because that's actually why I'm working on something like that, which is what's pulled me to Clairmeta. Now, so yeah, this is I was talking about before. So there's a lot of tools out there that make DCPs, and now RDD52 is available. I expect like Resolve makes DCPs, DCP-O-Matic, and there's literally about 15 to 20 different commercial and open source tools. If you trove through the internet, you'll find quite a lot of tools that do make DCPs. So, and that's one of the reasons why there's been quite a big issue with a lot of film festivals, etc., that DCPs have to be tested so much, because there's been so many people who have just created tools to do this, but haven't really put the effort in there to do the right testing, because that's very expensive and these tools aren't really in a position to do that. So Clairmeta will be there to really help fill that gap and ensure that things are better in the future. Now, I just wanted to talk about open source here. So Clairmeta is open source, and as an industry, I wanted to flag here that we should be very open to open source tools. And I wanted to show here that, for example, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, a lot of their technology which is taking over the world is built on open source, on Linux, for example. MySQL, Postgres is usually probably the database which is driving your TMSs. ISDCF is building its new registry on the Digital Cinema Naming Convention on Node, which is open source, on GitHub, which stores open source projects. The Academy recently actually is pushing an open source foundation for the creation of software, which is specifically affecting the production of films and film production environments. And they've, with ACES and all these color workflows, and if you really want to get into that, they've understood that embracing these open source technologies basically pushes the whole industry forward, and it's just good for the industry. And SMPTE finally is also doing a lot of more work on not just what goes over a coax cable in terms of SDI, etc., but it's all about standards which define how pictures go over networks now. And so they're very much moving to testing tools and open source tools as well. So it's very much changing, and we as an industry, which cinema is traditionally quite slow in adopting new technologies, we should open our eyes to that and try as an industry, as operators, to open our minds to taking on those new challenges. Now, another thing, so there's online tools. So this is a tool I'm working on. It's not open source, it's very complicated. It's more of an online tool, which I'll show you towards the end, because I want to show you the sort of tools which will most likely pop out of other people. Like I'm doing this. This will be a free tool to use. It's to help the industry, but it's building on top of just QCing the tool. It's trying to achieve QC of audio, etc., without having to go through a dubbing stage, etc., and trying to do that as much as possible. And talk about that a little later. Now I'm going to go through the install thing. I'm just going to show it to you. I'm not going to really go into it too deep, because it's not. It's not that sort of presentation. But there's currently two different options, and depending on how you want to install it, you can install it install it yourself, because it does need a few things you need to compile, or you can use adding a custom repository. I tend to stay away from custom repositories because I'm not sure what's coming in with them. So either way, you can do, but this is currently, if you want to install it, typically targeting Linux, because that's really where the powerhouse is of all these tools going into the future. And just to quickly go over that, there's, for example, this is one method where you have to run these couple of commands to install the different bits of software, and then install the application, and you're done, ready to go. And then there's another way where you can add a repository, which is basically you tell the software, the operating system, where it can get software from, and that'll actually pull in all the things I compiled in the previous one automatically from that particular software repository. So those are the two methods. If you wanted to use it today, that's the best way to do it. Now, in terms of your Windows, what's something like you can compile it under Python and get it working under Windows and compiling all the tools, but that's a lot more difficult, and Windows themselves are pretty much moving everything over to Linux as well. And there's something called Windows Subsystem for Linux too, and if you install that, then you basically install a Linux command line into your Windows operating system, and I'd just say you do exactly the same things as if you're in a Linux machine, and that's the best way forward, because pretty much the whole industry, even Microsoft's cloud platform has more Linux-based containers on it than Windows, which shows you how Linux is really the future of doing any sort of tooling like this. It's just the most compatible, and everyone's focusing on it now because it's just the best path. These are just some links on how to install WSL2 if you do come past this presentation in the future and you do want to try some of this. I'll just put that there for you to look at. Now, let's have a quick look at running the tool and what you'd expect to get or how to use it. So obviously, if you just once you've installed it, you're basically calling the library here, and I'll go back for a sec. And it comes back with the use models. You've got a check and a probe that you can do, and pretty much the reason you've got a probe is very useful because basically probe turns all the data about the DCP into what's called a JSON or a XML file, which you can then use to do anything you want with. So if you're writing something which wants to expect all the DCPs and find out a little bit of information about it, you can get it to probe the DCPs and give it all back to you in a way that in a language that the computer can understand, and then you can make a decision. So that's what probe is for. But realistically, as a cinema operator, we're probably more interested in just doing a conformance or compatibility test here. And then you've got there, you basically check type DCP, and then you get the results back of if there's any issues and some other data about it. So these sort of errors, etc., they're being expanded, as I said before, and other things like the RDD52 stuff will be added. But if it sees anything unusual or something that would cause it to fail, it will list it here, and you'll get a result at the end, pass or fail. At this stage, we're looking to expand on this feature set to turn it into more of a report, because currently, if everything's good, you just get pass. But we want to probably build in some more tools to say these are all the things it passed in later versions. It also does what's a VF file, a version file check against an original version file check. If the people out there may understand what that means in terms of if you get a version file and you need to make sure that it actually will work with a original version file, it will do that for you. Now, what's next? So, like I was saying before, better integration with RDD52 to ensure that the tool can basically QC to the highest percentage of systems compatibility. That'd be fantastic, removing all those checks, removing the need for film festivals to re-author content just in case, because now I've got a tool to really do all that for us and remove all those extra costs. Extend the output to produce a comprehensive QC tool. I want this, I'd like to see the tool to become like if you submitting, if you're a cinema and someone's going to submit a DCP to you, you usually have this is what it needs to be to submit it to you as a DCP. I see in the future that you say, okay, I want you to submit it to me, but you need to send it through a QC report from Clairmeta first. So it ensures that what I get from you will be qualified, and I know it'll play, and it's not my problem that it's going to play or not. It's now the person creating the content's problem to make sure that it's going to be correct to play on all the systems out there. So I see that as a good way to use this tool to move some of those costs onto the producer, for example. Leverage into other open source projects. So yes, other tools which make DCPs will potentially utilize this tool to ensure that they produce these reports and give us the sort of DCPs we need into the future. Now, so here's an example of its use. For example, this is an online tool I've been building for our local independent cinema industry. to help with the QC of content, and specifically it was more to help with the QC of audio. So we all know ads come from lots of different places, and we've all sat through a session where one ad's loud, the next ad's soft, and the audio will jump all over the place. So that's not a thrilling experience. So one of the things I'd like to see done, so now people aren't spending the time going to a dub house and making sure the audio is correct, etc., is to try and build a tool which allows a cinema or even the people making the content to make a decent, educated decision on if the quality of the audio and other aspects of the DCP are all where they need to be. Currently, just showing this page here now, obviously this does the check, and currently there's a DCP and it just passed, but we'll hopefully expand that out to a better report. But here, an example of a more extensive DCP, which obviously has numerous CPLs with it. And you can basically click on every CPL and get a report of exactly what happened with that CPL. Look at the structure of a DCP to ensure that everything is where it needs to be in terms of captions and metadata, and it'll also show the markers. If it has markers, it will actually show where they are, and if they're, visually you can see they're all in the right spot. You can preview everything to make sure it is what it's supposed to be. You can have a look at all the graphs of the video data in terms of its bitrate over time, etc., ensuring that it doesn't extend any bit rates over where it needs to be. And finally, obviously, it's got all the waveforms, the loudness in LEQM, which is the industry standard for our industry, LEQM weighting, weighted and non-weighted. Also using the LKFS readings as well, which is mostly used by, well, pretty much all software out there that does audio does LKFS. Pretty much LEQM is only cinema orientated, and doing loudness in software, doing LEQM based loudness testing is always an add-on tool. And a lot of people doing ads for small cinemas in regional areas don't have those sort of tools. So this is a way to allow cinemas to apply those sort of checks against the data. And you can see here in this check, for example, you can see all the channels and the waveforms to ensure, again, visually that everything needs to be where it is. And finally, obviously, you've got LEQM time-based charts of what the loudness is over time, and so with LKFS as well. And having access to all that data visually gives you a good chance to QC the content. Obviously, you can play back the content as well in that waveform editor. You can play it back and see how it all plays, etc., and give you a good indication without having to go to a dubbing stage, very expensive exercise, to ensure that your audio levels are where they need to be. So these are the sort of tools that, like, this tool will be free for people who want to upload trailers and ads. Hopefully in the future, it's still under development, as you probably can understand, with the QC side still being looked at. But these are the sort of tools I expect to come out. Now we've got things like Clairmeta and these extendeds to SMPTE RDD52 available to us to help us to make the industry more productive. And we need to become more productive to do more with less, considering the future constraints and the pressures that are on us due to the crisis in the future. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. And questions?
Thank you very much, James. And an extra thank you for staying up this late. I know it's way past midnight where you are in Melbourne,
yes.
So hugely appreciated. And bonus points from Andy Moulds, I'm sure, for mentioning the Academy Software Foundation and the good work that they do. But really terrific resource, really terrific overview of that. We're slightly over time with you, but I just want to say you also do a very great newsletter, keeping your contacts and colleagues and people who are some of your users updated. Where do people find details on how to get that?
Well, I do a newsletter for smallcinemaowners.com.au. It's mainly for small cinemas in Australia, where we discuss a lot of these issues, and I go over topics that are more focused on them. Also, my CineTechGeek YouTube channel, which a lot of you've probably heard about. Yes. I occasionally do videos for that. For example, the recent video I did was on how to make a server very cost effectively by using certain hardware buying from eBay, etc., and how to make it extremely efficient and fast and at very good costs. And these are very important issues for smaller cinemas, especially, for example, in Australia, where a lot of them happen to need to upgrade their servers because the VPF has expired and there's been due to some certain software issues, etc., there's been a call for a lot of locations to upgrade their hardware, and so I did a video on how to show them how to do that more cost effectively. Usually a lot of the content I make these days, because I'm so connected with the small cinema industry, is around trying to help the small industry out and with knowledge and understanding, and becoming more attuned with the fact that we are now a specialist IT industry to a degree. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Super. No, thank you for that. And I do mean it. I mean, those are terrific resources and things that you share for the industry. And I know the newsletter is primarily for small cinema operators in Australia, but a lot of things that you write and touch upon are true for small cinema operators all over the world. So for anybody interested in that, I would seriously recommend it. So, you know, search on Google or get in touch with James directly. But James, thank you very much again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.